The American Cotton Shippers Association, also known as AXA, is a trade association primarily made up of cotton merchants. Founded in 1924, AXA members manage the majority of the cotton trade, providing merchandising, delivery logistics, and risk management services to their customers. AXA is grateful to Senators Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi, Katie Britt of Alabama, Roger Marshall of Kansas, and John Boozman of Arkansas for introducing the Buying American Cotton Act of 2025, which will build structural demand for U.S. cotton. AXA urges all cotton industry stakeholders to support this initiative by reaching out to your congressional delegation and requesting their support for this legislation.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Cotton Grower Magazine's Cotton Companion podcast. I'm Jim Stedman, editor of Cotton Grower, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and colleague, Beck Barnes. Now, as we speak, the first big blast of the annual Heat and Humidity Festival has covered the Cotton Belt, thankfully drying up a lot of the moisture from the past few weeks, but it's been cranking the heat index up into uncomfortable levels, even for those of us in the South. That's good for young cotton, but unfortunately the weeds seem to like it a lot too. But at least growers now have a window open to try to catch up on some of those delayed treatments that they've been needing to get out there.
Yeah, I think it's probably more of a blessing than a curse in terms of, I think these guys are just so happy to have some a dry patch here to get, as you say, to get some treatments out there. And, I talked to a couple of my buddies. I was home over Father's Day weekend. When was that, Jim? Oh gosh, my days.
That's 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks ago now. And talked to some of my farming buddies down in the Mississippi Delta. And, so more than one of them told me it's like they have two different crops. They got planted in early April, and then next time they could finish up their planting, it was June. So, they got multiple growth stages going on in the same cropping year out there through much of the Mid-South. A lot of guys, you come down around north of Clarksdale, Jim, I don't think I've told you this yet, but there's fields out there that are just barren, right? They were rode up and there's nothing planted in them.
And there won't be at this point.
So, I'm happy for the guys who did get planted, but yeah, some of those, it's like I say, they're dealing with two different crops. So they're happy to just have a dry window, and I'm happy for them, despite, for me personally, which is, hey, that's the real important thing, right? Boy, I enjoyed we talk a lot about fall springs and fool spring. we had a mild spring here. The rain kind of kept the temps knocked back through much of May, and boy, those times are gone. It is hot and sticky out there now.
It is definitely summer in the South. But I've talked to a couple growers too down in the Mississippi area, and a good friend of mine who normally plants thousands, at least 1,000 acres, right around there, got 100 acres in this year before the window closed on him. So he's planning to do a lot of field prep for next year. It's unreal. But anyway, speaking of spraying applications and other necessary field work, we know that a lot of our listeners rely heavily on some of the latest ag technology in their farming operations. Whether it's field mapping to yield monitors to precision application equipment, cotton growers rank among the highest adopters of ag tech in helping make their farming business more efficient. So in this episode, we're going to take a look at some of the latest trends in automation and new technologies for the cotton market, some of them that are already in the fields and others that are not very far behind. And joining us for that discussion is our friend and technical expert, Dr. Ed Barnes, who is Senior Director, Agricultural and Environmental Research with Cotton Incorporated. He's been examining the process, the promise, and the potential for some of these new options, and we're going to get into that discussion here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, it's a good one. Y'all won't want to miss that one. But first, we want to welcome the Cotton Board as a supporting sponsor of the Cotton Companion podcast. Our colleague and custom content manager, Hillary Wynn, who y'all are familiar with, she recently visited with Dr. Ryan Kurtz VP of Agricultural and Environmental Research there at Cotton Incorporated. They talked about some of the multiple research efforts currently underway under the organization's sponsorship.
Hi, I'm Hillary Wynn, Custom Content Manager at Meister Media Worldwide, publisher of Cotton Grower Magazine. Joining me today is Dr. Ryan Kurtz, Vice President of Agricultural and Environmental Research at Cotton Incorporated. Ryan oversees the Cotton Production Research Program, leading a team of 6 scientists who develop innovative problem-solving research to increase the profitability and sustainability of cotton farming in the U.S. cotton industry. Ryan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hillary. It's good to be here.
How is Cotton Incorporated ensuring its research and investments translate into real on-the-ground value for producers?
Yeah, we know economic conditions are pretty tough right now. And because we fund research through universities, not everything Cotton Incorporated is doing is completely obvious. So I really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk some about the research that we are funding to provide value to growers. Our mission at Cotton Incorporated is to increase the demand for and profitability of cotton through research and promotion. And the Ag and Environmental Research Department is primarily focused on the profitability side. One of the most recent efforts for funding at universities across the belt is related to nitrogen use efficiency. Recommendations vary pretty widely from state to state and maybe aren't as best suited to managing as our current varieties as they could be. So we're funding new research to help growers determine which fields they can cut back on their nitrogen rates, directly saving money there, and then indirectly by reducing the need for PGRs, improving plant bug management, and defoliation at the end of the season. So be looking for extension publications, webcasts, and videos that are being developed right now. They'll be distributed this fall, both online and in-person grower meetings by the extension specialists. The outreach will focus on regional recommendations that account for residual nitrogen, organic nitrogen, soil type, crop rotation, soil health practices, and other factors. And decision aids are also going to be developed to help guide growers through these decisions and implementing the sound nitrogen recommendations and increasing nitrogen use efficiency.
Technology is evolving fast. What are some of the emerging innovations Cotton Incorporated is exploring that could transform the way growers manage inputs or pests while keeping their costs in check?
It's really crazy how fast things are evolving right now, especially with automation and AI. And these two tools are going to play key roles in production going forward and are going to help address labor issues as well as reducing input costs. And to keep the cost of some of these new technologies down, we're funding research that will keep much of it open source. So you as a grower can DIY it, or there will at least be a lot of competition in the market, keeping the price lower. One example is at the University of Arizona and Mississippi State, where we're supporting research to develop a see and till technology for cotton production systems. It's similar to see and spray, but uses a camera mounted system to precisely till rather than spray. So this technology is going to be part of an integrated weed management system. You'll still need to use traditional herbicides early and mid-season, and the see and till system will be used to control weed escapes later in the season. And so adding this late season mechanical control is going to go a long way to delaying herbicide resistance and weed seed bank levels, but still having minimal soil disturbance for conservation tillage systems. And so from a price perspective, the researchers that are working on this are using non-proprietary off-the-shelf cameras and equipment, and they're integrating them onto commercially available tillage implements. When the project wraps up later this year, our university collaborators are going to provide all the essential information for growers and local machine shops to build their own implements. Anything needed to build the machines, including drawings, wiring diagrams, lists of hardware, and the code to make it work, along with an image library of weeds and cotton from USDA, are going to be made publicly available.
We often hear that seed and crop protection companies drive a lot of ag research, but cotton definitely has some unique needs. How is Cotton Incorporated filling in the gaps to make sure cotton stays competitive and profitable long term?
Well, the seed and crop protection companies definitely deliver the varieties and products that are foundational for success. So we at Cotton Incorporated focus on how to use those products together in a system, as well as improve demand through new markets and uses. A great example of the latter is our focus on research and marketing for cottonseed and cottonseed oil. In our most recent grower survey, the value of cottonseed was a top 5 concern among growers. The Ag Research Department works really closely with our corporate communications department to make sure that cottonseed is an easy and top choice in dairy and beef cow rations. And we're also working on increasing demand for the oil in commercial kitchens and looking at new markets for it in the cosmetic industry.
Where can our audience find more information?
So, a great way to stay in the loop on what Cotton Incorporated is working on is through the Cotton Board's Cotton and Coffee Zoom sessions. Recently, Dr. Galen Morgan, who's coordinating the nitrogen use efficiency research that I mentioned earlier, gave an update on that project. So, I recommend Googling Cotton and Coffee and going to their YouTube channel and checking out what Galen put together. Other things I would recommend, we are funding the Cotton Specialist Corner podcast. You can find that anywhere you get your podcast. Just look for Cotton Specialist Corner. And we also, through Grow, offer the Focus on Cotton webcast series. Any of that you can find just by Googling Focus on Cotton or Cotton and Coffee or Cotton Cultivated.
Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Hillary. I appreciate you having us on.
All right. Thanks to Hillary and Ryan for that segment, and to the Cotton Board and Cotton Incorporated for their continued support of the Cotton Companion podcast.
Well, Beck, as always during cotton production season, we'd like to take a quick look at the most recent USDA crop progress numbers for cotton. And this is from the weekly report that was issued this week, in fact, yesterday on June 23rd. Right now, 92% of this year's crop has been planted. That's up 7 percentage points in the past week, but it's still 3 points shy of the 5-year average. And I think we're going to end up below average for planting on this year's crop. Most of the cotton producing states are now equal to or at least fairly close to their respective averages for this date. The season's outlier, as we were kind of discussing earlier, is Mississippi, where heavy continuous rains essentially ended planting a few weeks ago, and they're sitting currently at 20 percentage points off average. Squaring is now reported in 26% of the total crop, which is pretty much right on average for this date. Bowl set now seen in 5% of the total crop, led to no surprise by Arizona, California, and South Texas. And the current crop condition shows 47% of the crop rated good to excellent, 33% fair, and 20% poor to very poor.
Yeah, well, one more item of interest to share, Jim. Two giants of cottonseed processing, that's ADM and Pico Industries, are launching a joint venture that will combine both companies' cottonseed processing capabilities there in Lubbock, Texas. Now, the new joint venture will be majority owned by Pico and governed by a 6-member board that will feature equal representation from ADM and Pico. Both companies will each contribute their Lubbock-based processing facilities to the new company. The companies intend to complete the transaction and formally launch the joint venture in the third quarter of this year, 2025. So, neat deal there. But now, Jim, we want to take a break for a message from another new Cotton Companion sponsor, and that's AMVAC. Once again, here's our colleague and custom content manager, Hillary Wynn, and her discussion with Darren Malone. He's technical agronomist for the Southern region there at AMVAC.
Hi, I'm Hillary Wynn, Custom Content Manager at Meister Media Worldwide, publisher of Cotton Grower Magazine. Joining me today is Darren Malone, Technical Agronomist for the Southern region at AMVAC. Darren, welcome to the program.
Yes, glad to be here, Hillary. Thanks for having me on.
Darren, what weed threats are you hearing cotton farmers talking about this season?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges this year. There's definitely market challenges. One of the biggest challenges I think for a lot of growers is the lack of in-crop dicamba usage. So it's going to require them to make some different herbicide selections in 25. But the really biggest challenge I feel like today is the weather. So we've had a cool, wet May, and June's kind of started off that way. What happens when you get cool, wet weather? The weeds tend to get a head start on the cotton crop. And so they're going to be ahead of that crop. So identifying the right herbicide is going to be really important in this 25 growing season.
So what are some of the considerations farmers should be thinking about, and what are the best management practices to get control of these situations this summer?
Now, that's a great question, Hillary. I think some of the things they've got to look at is using proven and reliable products, and also thinking about which products provide the broadest spectrum of weed control and also giving you the best residual. When I think about herbicides, I like herbicides that give you flexibility. And what's important to me in flexibility is the ability to use that herbicide across all trait or all technologies, whether it be in list, whether it be in stem flex, whether it be conventional cotton, then also flexibility in timing. I like a herbicide that gives an opportunity to spread early post, but also may have some residual. But from a handling standpoint, I also like using herbicides that are easy to handle and safe to the end user.
Does a product like Invoke fit the bill when it comes to finding an alternative for dicamba?
Yeah, I think so. I think this year especially, I was looking at a LinkedIn quote the other day, and it said, you're comfortable with your herbicide program, you need to change it. Well, with the lack of using some in-crop dicamba this year, we're going to have to make different herbicide choices. So when we make those herbicide choices, I think AMVAC's got a product called Invoke that could allow that grower to provide a product that's got a low use rate. That's one thing I really like about it. Anywhere from 10 to 1500ths of an ounce. It is going to give the grower some flexibility in timing. If you look at the timing on it, you can make it anywhere from 5-leaf to a post-direct application. And then the other thing I like about it, it doesn't matter which cotton you planted. Even if you planted the Enlist or the XtendFlex or a conventional variety, you can use this herbicide over the top. But the other thing about Invoke, it's probably outside of maybe the Oxens herbicide. It's probably one of the broadest spectrum broadleaf herbicide on the market. But the one bonus weed that it does pick up, I feel like, is yellow nutsedge. But if you think about Invoke, it's, the calls I've been getting over the last few years has always been about nutsedge or a volunteer crop like soybeans. So, and I've already got a call this morning about volunteer soybean. If you're looking to control that species, let's say you're in a rotation with soybeans and you got that volunteer soybean out there, it allows you to do that, with Invoke. But some of the other weeds that Invoke's always been good on is morning glories, sickle pie. These are key problematic weeds in the South. And even has some activity on mare's tail. And, with the lack of use of dicamba this year in crop, we'll see a few more mare's tail in that crop. Invoke could give us another tool to help manage some of these problematic, weeds.
How can cotton growers find out more about Invoke this season?
Great question. You can go to your AMVAC sales rep and get that information to your authorized retailer as well that sells AMVAC products. And if you got any questions, feel free to reach out to our AMVAC rep or even myself, which I know a few people in the southern region. So again, it's all about picking a proven, reliable herbicide that it can help you control some of these troublesome weeds in your cotton fields. And we might be a good choice that you can pull out of the toolbox and make that product selection using Invoke in this 25 growing season.
Darren, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, that's great, Hillary. Enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you down the road.
Okay, thanks to Hillary and Darren for that segment. And a big thank you to AMVAC for their support of the Cotton Companion podcast.
Well, so we mentioned earlier, automation and new technologies are making a significant impact in cotton production, all the way from the farm office to the tractor and sprayer cab and to the gin, certainly. And joining me now with more details on this key topic is Dr. Ed Barnes, Senior Director of Agricultural and Environmental Research with Cotton Incorporated. Ed, welcome back to the podcast, and thanks for joining us again for what seems to be an annual visit.
I really appreciate the opportunity and talk cotton and automation, two of my favorite topics.
Well, you're the guy. You're our expert on this. First of all, it looks like we've got this year's crop in the ground, or at least what we're going to get in the ground. So as usual, it didn't happen without a few problems and delays out in parts of the Cotton Belt. What are you hearing from your colleagues and contacts about how things are looking in fields and certainly maybe some of your research plots too as well?
Yeah, so Galen Morgan, our agronomist, just got back last week from a trip through the Mid-South and said it was a little bit depressing. A lot of people were delayed in planting. Probably some fields aren't going to get planted this year in the Mid-South. So that's probably going to take the acres down even less than we thought. So that's not great, but it did rain in Texas. So we hope that keeps happening.
Well, if Texas gets rain, they can make up for the yield we're going to miss everywhere else. So usually, at least,
right.
But yeah, it has been a long, wet spring in the Mid-South, and I feel for a lot of the guys out there. I know understand what they're up against. But anyway, it looks like you've been busy recently talking about status and impact of automation and new technology. Or things that are currently impacting or getting ready to impact cotton production. Now, we've visited in the past about some of these potential innovations. There didn't seem to be a real timeline attached to some of them. Right now, it seems like they're coming hot and heavy. How are you managing to keep up with all of these?
That's really becoming almost like a second job. And trying to keep up with this is changing so rapidly. And I'm trying to keep up with the latest AI tools. And I was really surprised about a month or two ago, I was on a panel talking about AI and there's a farmer on the panel and this happened to me twice. The farmers started talking about how they're using Chat GPT on their farm, or and that was one example. But then another, last week I was talking to one of my board members, and he's using Grok, one of the other AI tools, to help. He said, we're working in partnership to design some new equipment for my farm. And so it's just really, really blowing me away that how rapidly this is being adopted.
Since you mentioned AI, again, like you said, you can't really talk about anything anymore without AI coming up. It seems inevitable, obviously, for just about everything, and obviously there's value, but there's also some cautions involved. How is AI factoring in for cotton, according to some of the things you've already mentioned, and maybe ag in general, and what kinds of things do growers need to keep in mind to really make it work for them?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, there's a lot of possibilities, but also a lot of cautions. And so let's start with some of the cautions.
Yeah.
And, I've been playing with some of these tools, and what gives me real concern is I can ask a question where I know the answer, and I send it to whether it's Chat or Copilot or DeepSeek, and it comes back with an answer very confidently wrong. It's just wrong, but there's nothing in the way that answer was presented that indicates that it didn't know the right answer. It's like, oh, here's your answer, so that's one of the kind of frustrations right now, is like some of these tools, 80% of the time they're right, and they can be really useful and get you fast answers. But I still feel like we're at a point where you almost have to verify everything, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a story I heard, and that there were some herbicide recommendations given by a tool, and they were just, it was basically, they were going to cause crop damage and were off label. So really need to not take AI at its word right now.
But yet it's going to have a place on the farm. What do growers, is there anything growers need to do to kind of get ready for some of that? Did they need to put up any plans or anything in place?
Yeah, one of the things we've been talking about for a long time in the arena of precision agriculture, and then we talked about digital agriculture, now we're talking about AI and automation, is electronic record keeping. And that is becoming, when I started working in some of these things on crop models back in the 80s, growers would say, that's too much data. I can't use that. It wants too much data. Now growers are constantly saying, what do I do with all this data? Well, AI is going to answer that question. And it is answering that question. And so some of the things that in the near term, and I mean, even right now, is some of these AI tools can put some really advanced data analytics in the hands of everybody, or at least, and so maybe your crop consultant that's been helping you manage your, some of your data and make prescriptions for you has some knowledge of analytical methods. Well, AI is just going to make them really good at it. And it's going to give them some tools, to do some things that would have been really hard to do in the past, and they can do it much faster now. So in the very near term, or, today, being able to extract more value from data is there. And so if you're not saving your yield maps, start saving your yield maps. If you just do grid soil and your co-op takes it and you don't worry about it after that, start hoarding your data, because it's not going to be a liability, or, it's going to be useful information that's going to make you more profitable.
Yeah. Find yourself a cloud somewhere to put all that stuff.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure if we looked hard enough, we could probably still find a few computers at work using floppy disks. But,
put it somewhere.
Put it somewhere.
Well, hard drives are cheap. You can get a terabyte. Well, take imagery out of the equation, UAV imagery, but you know, you can go out and buy for $100 a couple terabyte drive, external drive, and that
Yeah.
should be more than sufficient for a lot of the data. We don't
Okay.
include imagery. So yeah, and we do have a presentation on our Focus on Cotton site on developing a digital strategy by John Fulton from Ohio State University. He used to be at Auburn. We kind of cried a little bit when he left us to go north, but still pulling back in to get his expertise. And he shared, some ideas that people should be thinking about in developing that digital strategy for their farm.
Good. Well, one of the things that I think we can look at too in terms of the realities in the market right now, machine vision, or I think as you put it, machine perception. We've seen the success that John Deere See & Spray has had. We know there's more and similar products out there. We know there are more coming. What's the latest update on adoption of this machine perception? And it's not just going to be for weeds anymore, right?
Right. No, weeds are obviously the one that are farthest along, and with all the herbicide resistance and all the challenges we have, you can see why a lot of efforts put into that at the beginning. And so, like you said, there's like at least 25 detect and spray systems coming, mainly focused on weeds. There's 10 detect and laser systems. So there's just, a lot of these things, and some of them are available beyond the John Deere See & Spray, are available in the US, available right now. So that's good news. And like you said, what I'm excited to think about, and some of these companies are now beginning to implement this, every time you drive across the field now, if you have a detected system, it's collecting data. And so we need to be taking advantage of that. And there needs to be some things happen. Again, I talked about how imagery can really clog up whether it's a cloud drive or a hard drive or whatever. So some of that imagery needs to be interpreted on the fly. And just like they're doing with weeds, right? They're not going to store every time there's like 30 some cameras on that boom. They're not going to store every image, but they will store where it found a weed and where it triggered spray. And so the next step is, let's start storing GPS points where there was a hint of insect damage, where there was a sign of a disease. And, again, so when you've done let's say your herbicide trip, not only do you see where the weeds were, you see where there's some other problems that you need to go back and address.
What about the image libraries? Those got to be just expanding like crazy.
It's really exciting to see how quickly that's moving. We sponsored a project. The professor started at NC State and then moved to Mississippi State and he put in a lot of effort. And some students did a lot of hard work to get like 5,000 images of weeds, right? Key weeds. And now Galen's got a project where I think there's going to be hundreds of thousands of images of weeds. I just saw where there's something called WeedNet. That's an open source image library. I think it's more of an international library, but it has 1,500 species of weeds in the catalog. So this is really going to accelerate, how fast this technology can come to the farm and be very robust. And that's the other thing that's kind of interesting. When I say, like, even the project that USDA is doing, and it's in collaboration with some others, including Texas A&M, but they're growing weeds in pots, all right, with in outside, not in a greenhouse, but kind of an artificial image. But then and then they're also taking pictures of weeds in the field, but they're putting a gray background down, and so they're going to be able to then overlay any kind of soil background, any kind of cover crop or residue in the field. And so that one weed image is going to turn into 20 or 40, through some simulated imagery. So that's really going to accelerate this as well. And again, mean that we don't have to go out to every farm and every soil type, collect imagery to get a good result.
Obviously, and as we get more and more of this type of learning in the system, is it going to help with the affordability a little bit? Is it going to become more economical for people to get involved in adapting this technology?
That's really important. We did a survey of our growers about automated tractors, and cost was number one concern, right? And so if this technology doesn't increase profitability, we're wasting our time. So that is, a clear goal. I'm excited to see some kind of open source applications that may be cool. The downside of open source is kind of a do-it-yourself thing, a DIY.
Right.
But the cost is dramatically lower, right? And so Galen's working on a project with Mississippi State where hopefully there'll be kind of a build your own see and till using an open source camera where it could be very, very affordable, and you won't need a degree in computer science to do it either, but you won't need to turn a wrench pretty well. So
got to be able to weld a little bit too.
Yeah, maybe some welding could be involved, some things that maybe people are more comfortable with. And again, just as there becomes more competition, the cost is also going to be, brought down as well. And so I'm excited. I think there's also some research going on in other crops that I've looked at where they're starting to look at, if you go to a smaller autonomous tractor and maybe instead of having one big tractor, you have two smaller horsepower autonomous tractors, that actually that becomes more economical because suddenly you're not, buying, a 500 or 250,000 or to $500,000 machine, right? You can buy two much more affordable machines, and then the automation takes away the labor costs that used to be a challenge. And so I really do think we're going to be able to downsize our equipment a little bit without increasing labor, and hopefully actually decreasing labor. And that's the other thing that's coming. Right now, a lot of the automation is the tractor drives itself. It's just kind of, auto steer on steroids. But we're seeing already some, the ability of these machines to tender themselves, to reload herbicide sprays, to refuel themselves, to switch out their own batteries. So we're talking something that's more truly autonomous, right? You don't have to babysit. And that's when the labor restrictions will really be lifted, when that technology becomes more available and robust.
What about harvesting? Now, we've talked in the past, I know there's been a lot of work done on harvesting equipment, or, swarms out there. And I think just about every university in the Cotton Belt has been working on something like that. Is that going to be a realistic technology, or is that going to have to grow up, kind of scale up a little bit in order to really have some good potential?
Yeah, that I think the verdict's still out on that. And I do know we have our automation advisory panel, and they caution me that they don't want hundreds of little robots running around their farm, right? That's sounds like a big hassle. So I think scale is yet to be determined. Maybe it's not. I still am intrigued by the flexibility these swarms have. There's a company that's a division of AGCO that is looking at, basically little row unit planters, where it's just the planting unit that plants a single row at a time. And that becomes almost like infinitely scalable. But then you got all these little row units you got to keep up with. So that may not be the scale, but I do think we can. I'm not sure that 120, 130 foot boom is our future. I think something like 12 to 30 rows is going to be maybe a sweet spot. I don't, but anyway, I think we will. There's a lot of reasons where smaller brings a lot of advantages. You know, if a machine fails, you're not completely out of business. And for areas like the Southeast and Mid-South where you have odd shaped fields, you can better custom, you know, you're not having half the boom turned off the whole time you're running in that field. So I think there's a lot of possibilities that this is going to bring us.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked about the production side. What about the ginning side? That seems to be increasingly automated at this point, and I know there's been quite a bit of work done on some new techniques. Where do we stand with some of the ginning innovations?
Yeah, so the ginning industry really took off on this, and they have the option now to automate just about everything around the bell press, right? The plastic strapping system, I think 80% of gins have an automated plastic strapping system now. And then we're getting the auto baggers. So now you don't need someone putting bags on, and then auto samplers. So I have been to some gins where, you basically have one person just watching the bell press. They're not really doing any, maybe they're putting some labels in the sample, but that's about it. They're not overstressed. And so where we still see, some of the labor is now on the front end that we've kind of taken off the back end. So about getting the, modules loaded, getting the plastic off in a safe way, and staging modules. And so I think that's one of the next areas that show some promise. There's a hay company called Vermeer, and they have something called it's a prototype. It's not commercial, but it's a well-developed prototype. They call it, I think, the Bellhawk. And it's an autonomous machine, and it can run through a hay field and stage all the round hay bales for pickup. And, you just cut it loose. It goes, and even, for cotton, it'd be even easier for it, because with those hay bales, it doesn't have a map of where they were dropped. It just has to go find them using machine vision.
Yeah.
So they said sometimes the hills can cause them a little bit of a challenge. It doesn't see over the next rise, but overall that technology is well developed and demonstrated. So thinking that we could automate, getting modules off the gin yard and into the module feeders, really think a near-term possibility. And I'm also excited about, the RFID technology that's there right now. Is, last year we kind of showed that's really useful information, especially variety. And even if it's not RFID, I just encourage farmers to let their ginners know what varieties in that module, because the gin can learn that there's some varieties they're going to have to slow down for, and there's some that they can speed up for. And that's going to make the gin more efficient. And that means they're going to process your cotton, in a more appropriate manner. So it's a win-win for everybody. So I just take a little bit of extra time and either put it in the electronic file or write it on the belt, on the module tag, what that variety is.
It's amazing. Yeah, that I'll tell you right now, somebody who grew up in East Tennessee, throwing hay bales, every summer, anything that would catch, stack, move bales that didn't require, teenage assistance, would have been, highly, highly coveted. But nevertheless, time moves on, and it's amazing how automated those processes have become. It's every June my arms still itch, just out of habit. But anyway, I digress. Obviously, there's no lack of continuing development discussion for cotton. And it's always a pleasure and an education to have you with us. For those of you who want to hear more about some of these topics, please link up to the Cotton Board's YouTube channel and take a listen to the Coffee and Cotton presentation. That would be season 6, episode 6, featuring Ed Barnes, going into a whole lot more detail on some of the topics we've touched on. Ed, I know the Cotton Incorporated research pipeline is busy this year. We look forward to seeing and talking about some of those results with you later this year, or certainly when we get to Beltwide.
All right. Yep. We've got plenty of work going on.
All right. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate the time.
Always great talking with you, Jim.
Well, all right. That's it for this episode of the Cotton Companion podcast. Thanks again to our friend, Dr. Ed Barnes, for joining us with his insight, his outlook on automation and the new technology for cotton. Thanks to our sponsors, the American Cotton Shippers Association, the Cotton Board, and Ryan Kurtz, and to AMVAC and Darren Malone. And as always, thanks to you, dear listeners, for joining us and for your continued support. As always, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did like what you've heard, please be sure to spread the word and tell your farming friends and neighbors about the Cotton Companion podcast. Here's where and how they can find us.
You can find the Cotton Companion in 3 easy ways. First, go to cottongrower.com/companion, or simply click the podcast tab at the top of the homepage. Second, subscribe to our channel on iTunes or wherever you find your podcasts these days. And 3, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, the Cotton Grower e-News, that's delivered to your email inbox every Tuesday morning. You can do that by going to cottongrower.com/subscribe. Also, be sure to follow Cotton Grower on social media. We are at Cotton Grower Mag on Twitter. And on Facebook, you'll find us by searching for Cotton Grower Magazine.
Cotton Companion Podcast is produced by Tyler Hatch and Kim Henderson, our talented colleagues at the world headquarters for Meister Media Worldwide in lovely Willoughby, Ohio, where I'm sure it is much cooler than it is in the Mid-South. I'm Jim Stedman, he's Peck Barnes, and we'll be back with you in a few weeks with another episode of the Cotton Companion. Until then, please stay cool and stay safe.
Yeah, he works and he works and he works and he works all day. God made a farmer.